Hello, my name is Manahil and I'm here with former Mayor of Nottingham, Wendy Smith. So I hope you don't mind, I'm just going to ask you a few questions. So let's begin. So have you ever felt overwhelmed with the responsibilities that came with your title?
Not really, because when I was Lord Mayor, I'm assuming you're talking about being Lord Mayor and not being a councillor. When I was Lord Mayor, I was given really good instructions on what to do. And when I arrived at any event, people were very, very welcoming and they really looked after me. So I found that really not too difficult.
Oh yeah, that's good. Did you ever receive any sort of criticism when you decided you would travel via public transport instead of having your own personal car?
Oh, not at all, no. In fact, the reason I decided to publicise that was because I didn't want people to think that the council was spending lots of money on a chauffeur-driven car, which used to happen quite a long time ago. So I also thought it was important to publicise the buses, because I do travel on the buses all the time. So it was a double whammy, really. And I definitely didn't receive any criticism. On the contrary, people were really pleased.
And you also mentioned that you don't get much traffic whilst travelling on buses and it's more easier for the environment.
Yes, well, definitely, yes. Well, it's not that necessarily that you don't get much traffic, it's because there are bus lanes and so it does make it easier. Certainly on the route that I travel, it does make it easier to get into town.
Can you please share some of the highlights of your year as a Lord Mayor?
Yeah, there were quite a few. Well, I mean, I enjoyed absolutely every event I went to, I have to say. One of the main things was, one of the first events was the Queen's Jubilee, celebrating, 70 years on the throne. But of course, no one expected that a few months later she would die. And so I had to do quite a lot of things following her death. I had to lay flowers on the council house steps, open a book of condolence, and also in the market square announce the accession of King Charles. And there were a few thousand people gathered in the market square to hear me say that Charles was now king. And that was a really special event. I mean, very sad, but on the other hand, happy because, we had a new king.
I've heard you were once the voice of trams. So would you like to tell us more about how you became interested in doing so and how you got selected?
This was about 20 years ago, a long time ago. Well, there was a competition because they wanted somebody local to be the voice of the tram. And I'd always wanted really to do voiceovers. So at the time, I don't think I had a computer. So I recorded the announcements that they wanted people to make on a cassette, and I sent it in. I was shortlisted. I was in the final 6, and then I was actually voted the winner, which did amaze me actually, because if they wanted a local voice, as you can hear, I haven't got a Nottingham accent, but people still voted for me, which was absolutely wonderful.
So how did you hear about they were selecting for the voice of trams?
Oh, I think the BBC mentioned it. It was in the Nottingham Post, just the local media, really.
Oh yeah, okay. So you have worked with a team which supports children with disabilities, such as being deaf. Is there any specific reason why you chose to work in this field, as you've also learnt British Sign Language?
Yeah, well, I began my career as a music teacher in secondary schools, and then I left teaching for a while to do other things. And I decided to go back into teaching, and I started off as a supply teacher, and I was teaching children with special needs. And I then saw a job advertised to teach deaf children, and that sounded really interesting. So I applied for the job. I didn't realise you had to have a special qualification as a teacher of the deaf, but I applied for the job and I got it, and then eventually I managed to train as a teacher of the deaf. And of course, because I was teaching deaf children, I learnt British Sign Language so I could communicate better with them. And I stayed teaching deaf children and children with disabilities for quite a few years.
So is there something that you've learnt in sign language that you're really proud of, or?
Well, just the ability to be able to communicate, really. I think like many languages, once you've learnt it quite well, you never really forget it. So even now, when I meet my deaf friends, I'm able to communicate with them, not as well as I could a few years ago, but at least I can communicate. And I think people are really pleased if you can at least try to communicate with them in their own language, whatever that language is.
So do you think they should teach this in schools, primary schools? Sign language?
I think it would be a really good idea, and in some primary schools and secondary schools they do have classes, but classes are readily available at the Notts Deaf Society. So if anybody wants to learn sign language, they just have to Google for lessons and they'll find them.
Okay, so you now play drums in 2 jazz bands. Did you learn drumming whilst growing up, or is this something you've discovered with time?
Well, I trained as a classical musician. I studied organ and harpsichord at Music College. But about 15 years ago, I had breast cancer. And sometimes I think when you've had a really major thing in your life that could actually have ended your life, you reevaluate things. And I've always admired drummers and the skill they had. And so what I did was I brought myself a drum kit and just put it in the spare bedroom, and I had lessons, and I never thought of playing in front of anybody. But then I was looking through the Nottingham Post one day and I saw a jazz workshop advertised. It was for people who were trained musicians but didn't really know anything about jazz. So I started going along to that, and they said, oh, we've got a jazz band that rehearses here and they're looking for a new drummer. So I joined the band. I wasn't really good enough to be the main drummer, so I used to shake tambourines and so on and play the drums a little bit. But gradually over time, I became the drummer, and now I'm the drummer with the Shipston Street Jazz Orchestra. That's the big band. And I've got my own quintet called Cool Jazz.
So you've came a long way, like a journey from becoming not the main drummer, but before. So
yes, definitely.
That's quite inspiring.
Yeah.
So you've been a part of many festivals, including the Bilborough Arts Festival. So is art something you're interested in?
Yeah, well, arts encompasses a lot of different things, music, photography, drama, visual arts and so on. I actually set up the Bilborough Arts Festival because I live in Bilborough, and it wasn't a place which ever had a festival. And I thought, why should places like Woollerton or Sherwood have a festival and Bilborough not have one? So I set it up with some other people in 2016, and we've been going from strength to strength since.
Yeah, okay. Lastly, do you have any advice for the upcoming generation who are interested in politics or just getting their voice heard?
I think a lot of people say that politics doesn't affect them.
Yeah.
But politics affects everybody, because politics is schools, parks, libraries, roads, footpaths, the NHS. Politics affects every area of life because decisions are made by politicians.
Yeah.
And if you want to become a politician, then you can do so. You can either be a member of a political party or stand as an independent. But if you fancy standing as a councillor, for instance, then just find your local councillors, speak to them, see what it's like, and it's a very rewarding occupation.
Yeah. Sarah, thank you very much for taking time out of your day to answer these questions.
My pleasure.
Hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you.